Thousands of Dutch people had been recording their experiences under German occupation since the Nazi invasion. Only if we succeed in bringing the simple, daily material together in overwhelming quantity, only then will the scene of this struggle for freedom be painted in full depth and shine. Anne Frank responded by setting aside Kitty, the diary she had created as a personal refuge, and began a revised version called The Secret Annex, which she hoped to publish. Other diarists persevered too, and after the country was liberated in May 1945, they showed up at the National Office for the History of the Netherlands in wartime. With their notebooks and letters in hand, more than 2,000 diaries were collected, each a story of pain and loss, fear and hunger, and yes, moments of levity amid the misery. But unlike Frank's diary, most of these accounts never surfaced again. Scholars read them once to inventory them, then shelved them. Powerful but mute, witnesses to the horrors of war. Now, though, the Dutch have launched an effort to transcribe the handwritten or typed pages into digital documents. The most valuable diaries are the ones where they wrote about their own feelings, or conversations they had on the street, or with family, or how they felt about the persecution of the Jews. Their words, filled with anxiety born of illness, isolation, and uncertainty, register with particular power today in another unsettled time. Elizabeth writes of the Nazi attack that began in the early morning of May 10, 1940, and ultimately wrote 941 pages. She was 49 years old and the wife of a pharmacist and optician who owned a grocery store. In her own words, "I had always assumed they would leave us alone. We'd been neutral until the end, and good to the Germans. We heard shouting, too. For a minute, we felt like we were paralyzed, and my first thought was for the soldiers. There'll be bloodshed. War, we couldn't believe it. Everything in nature was so beautiful, and that day in particular was sunny and bright. I wept. We weren't free anymore, and this, if we understood correctly, as a result of betrayal by our own people. We couldn't believe it, yet it was true. Everyone was glad no more people would be killed, but still, to become a part of Germany, how awful. What will the future bring? Poverty for our country, a heavy ordeal for everyone, and an uncertain future." Katrina's diary gives vivid testimony of the impression she made on people in her work as a Red Cross nurse. Page after page is filled with notes of appreciation, and sometimes pictures from her medical colleagues and the injured English, French, and German soldiers that she treated. A woman from The Hague, whose name was not disclosed by the archive, is among those Dutch who sympathized with the German effort. Among her concerns was the flight of the royal family. Her entry from May 15, 1940 states, "The Dutch air defense people ordered us to build barricades in the street in front of our houses. Everyone had to help loosen tiles, stack them, and take all kinds of junk out. I even saw parts of bed frames in the street. It was just ridiculous, absolutely laughable. It looked as if it had been done by children. Later we heard that citizens weren't even allowed to do this. Anyway, what were these barricades to the Germans? They would easily push everything aside with their powerful vehicles. Now they are proper soldiers, not like our boys, who couldn't control their nerves and just kept shooting at random." The Nazis rounded up Jews in Amsterdam and sent them to concentration camps, as captured in images taken by a German soldier. Many Dutch people who were not Jewish were outraged and responded by going on strike in several cities. Lenny, a 10-year-old girl, collected poems in an album that was filled with contributions from friends and family. Its success as a diversion can be measured in the fact that the occupation is referred to only once in its pages. Distribution vouchers decorate an entry from May 1944. John Christian's diary features accounts of events in 1941, when the occupiers first began rounding up and deporting Jews. John Christian, a notary and poet from Den Helder, wrote 3,600 pages in his multi-volume diary. He states, "There had been tension before, apparently as a result of requisition of workers for Germany at one of the Amsterdam shipyards. This issue seems to have been settled by the German authorities, but the imprisonment of the Jewish population was not accepted by their Aryan fellow townsmen. It was eerily quiet in the city at night. Only pistol shots could be heard from time to time. I don't know yet whether there were any casualties, and if so, how many. Some 300,000 workers joined the strike in Amsterdam, where there was marching in the streets. The next day, workers in Haarlem, Hilversum, Utrecht, and other cities joined in. Clashes with retaliating German forces in various places left 9 dead and 24 wounded." Mirjam of Amsterdam wrote at a time when conditions were particularly gruesome for Dutch Jews, because the sick were among the first to be carted off in transports to concentration camps. People who were ill often piled into the homes of able-bodied relatives, creating cramped households. In her diary, February 23, 1943, half past midnight, she wrote, "This is no life, but hell on earth. My hands are trembling so much I can barely write. This is all getting too much. This is more than anyone can bear. Another transport is leaving this evening. I plan not to go to bed too early. Aunt Dina is staying with us at the moment. I already wrote to you that she stays at our house during the day because she's been left at home on grounds of illness, and now she fears of being taken away, which is what happens in most of these cases. At home on Saturday morning, she got such a bad crick in her back that she couldn't even move, not even in bed. My aunt has become unwell, and because she can't stay with us, we have to have her picked up in this way. And would you please excuse me now, for Mother isn't home either. This is the kind of act you have to put on, because it would be unwise to reveal too much. Well-intentioned gossip could fall on the wrong ears." Another diary with many illustrations, this one written by Petronella, recounts events including her arrest, along with her mother, by the Germans during a house search. Cornelis, a 40-year-old salesman for an English asbestos company, recognized the disparity between how his family and the Jewish people were treated during a 1943 train trip to an orchard. The outing was disrupted by a raid in Amsterdam that rounded up more than 2,400 Jews for deportation. In his diary on June 20th, 1943, he wrote, "Many people on the train don't even know what's going on in Amsterdam. The last Jews are being rounded up, herded up together and taken away like cattle, from hearth to home to foreign parts, first to one place, then to another, then finally transported to Poland. Oh, the misery these people must be going through. Separated from their wives and children. They may not be a pleasant people, but they're still human beings. How can the good God allow this?" While in Amsterdam, we saw the Jews carrying their bundles on their backs, their blankets. They packed their things days in advance. Still, how hard their departure must have been. parting from their familiar living rooms, their friends and acquaintances, while we're eating cherries, one basket after another, lazing around. How lovely this place is. Some of the diaries have elaborate illustrations, such as this album from a young girl, Merjik, that accounts the battle in 1944 around her home in Oosterbeek, a Dutch village. Merjik, who now lives in Maastricht, recopied the diary in 1947. It was then filled with drawings by her father. Philip, a journalist in his 50s, was arrested in September 1942 for not wearing a Star of David on a tram and was sent to Westerbork. In his diary on Saturday, May 29, 1943, he wrote, "It feels as though I'm an official reporter reporting on a shipwreck. We're in a cyclone together, aware that the whole ship is sinking slowly and trying to reach a harbor, but this harbor seems so far away. I'm slowly beginning to realize that I haven't been brought here by my persecutors. I'm on this journey voluntarily to do work. I'm busy all day long, not bored at all. Sometimes I almost don't have enough time. Duty calls and labor is noble. I spend much of the day writing. Sometimes I start as early as 5:30 in the morning. Sometimes I'm still at it at bedtime, summarizing my impressions or experiences of the day." Philip continued with his diary entries. Thursday, June 1st, 1943, he wrote, "The transport continued to evoke disgust. People are actually taken into animal wagons intended for transporting horses, and the deported no longer lie on straw, but among their bags and food and small pieces of luggage on the bare floor, including the ill, who were given a mattress only last week. Dirty immigrants who own no more than what they're wearing and what's hanging from them. Men, quiet faces drawn. Women often sobbing. The elderly stumbling down the bad road, sometimes through mud all over, buckling underneath their heavy load." He continues with an entry on Tuesday, January 25, 1944. He wrote, "A transport of thousands of people left for Auschwitz in a howling storm and pouring rain. In animal wagons yet again. The majority was from the S barracks, 590 people, the rest young men of Alea, old men from the hospital, and 31 young, nameless children from the orphanage whose parents were either absent or already sent to Poland. People still don't know what's happening to the deported Jews in Poland." When will the war be over? When will this misery of the weekly transports come to an end? The women lament, the war is going well, but there's a transport every day. The men saying mockingly, trusting the war will end soon in victory for the Allies. Winter is progressing, and people fear that if there's no decisive battle this winter, the war will drag on into the summer, and there won't be a single Jew left on Dutch soil. Hope alternates with fear. Where are we heading? What is our fate? What is our future? Not all the Dutch diaries were created in Europe. Dick van Englenberg, making use of the available paper, recorded his experiences in an internment camp in the Dutch East Indies on the back of Monopoly money. Petronella, a 27-year-old teacher from Rotterdam, described in her diary how famine affected daily life. During the last winter of the war, the Hunger Winter as it was known, the Germans blockaded much of the Netherlands, cutting off food and fuel supplies in response to a Dutch rail strike intended to help the Allies. In her diary, she wrote, "Yesterday we kept some potatoes aside from the already insufficient afternoon meal. We ate them with a few bits of fried onion mixed in and a cup of soup at 5:30 in the evening before it got dark. I calculated that each of us could have one more slice of bread, which we kept until bedtime and had with a cup of tea. Otherwise, it would have been too long until the next morning. I have a sore foot, a large blister. Dad can't get a hold of anything anymore. No vegetables, no onions. The potato man isn't even around. The Diary of Petronella continued to the end of the war in the Netherlands and included scenes of food drops by the Allies, as well as the arrival of American and Canadian troops in a liberated Rotterdam in May 1945. Anton, a 39-year-old teacher in Delft, wrote about how the war in the Netherlands ended on May 5, 1945. Canadian and German commanders reached an agreement that day on the capitulation of German forces. But Anton is among those who are slow to trust that the war is really over. He wrote in his diary, "It's real now though, and while I'm writing this I try to realize what it means. But it's so hard to put down into words. 5 years of having lived under the yoke of a ruthless enemy aren't erased in just a few moments. But what I can grasp is that soon there'll be food, there'll be gas, electricity, and water. There'll be fuel. Trains and trams will run again. Our men will return from G, where they have been living as forced laborers for years. Our prisoners of war and students will also return. I can walk down the street at any time, day or night. The blackout paper can be removed everywhere. I don't need to be frightened when a car's driving down the street. There'll be regular school and work hours again. All these things are running through my mind. Not all at the same time, not one by one. Sometimes I become aware of a few of them, which remain for a moment, then recede until another one comes flashing through my brain." The diary of M.E. Versteeg captured the arrival of Allied forces in the city of Zwolle in mid-April 1945, several weeks before the capitulation of the German army in the Netherlands. Of the 7 diarists excerpted, only Miss Bohl, who was 103 and resides in Israel, is still alive. She was sent to a concentration camp during the war, but was one of a handful of prisoners in Bergen-Belsen who were traded for the release of German prisoners of war in Palestine during the war. Mr. Mechanicus was also put on a train to Bergen-Belsen. From there, he was transferred to Auschwitz, where he was shot on arrival on October 12, 1944. Mr. Krusinga survived the war and later lived in Friesenveen, a town in the Netherlands where he died on February 1, 1971, at the age of 75. Miss Van Louisen van Wielink became active in the resistance and is credited with saving the lives of 72 Jews. She, her husband, and son were arrested and imprisoned for this work, but survived the war. Archivists do not have a sense of what happened to the other diarists featured here, but they hope to keep their memories alive through their diaries.